This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations.
We want families to come here and gain insightful strategies that empower them to successfully teach diverse learners at home.
Hosted by founder and CEO of SPED Homeschool, Peggy Ployer.
Our goal is that these powerful weekly conversations will boost your confidence to cultivate the best at-home learning environment for your student.
For more homeschool resources, go to spedhomeschool.com. You're listening to Empowering Homeschool Conversations with Peggy Ployer.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Empowering Homeschool Conversations. Today, we are going to talk about Gifts Unveiled, a parent's journey with a special needs child, with a very special guest, Steve Demme, who doesn't need a whole lot of introduction, but I'll give you a little one, Steve. Steve has served in part-time, full-time pastoral ministry for many years after graduating from Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary. He's the creator of Matthew C. and the founder of Building Faith Families. And he'll probably talk a little bit about all of that as you're going to share some things. I'm super excited about this. Have you ever talked about this in any speaking context yet in the homeschool community? Or is this new?
Yes and yes. I wouldn't even know how many years ago, maybe 20 years ago, I was asked by a board member of LEA, which is the New York Homeschool Association.
Mm-hmm.
And she asked me to speak on what it's like to have a special needs child from a father's perspective.
Yeah.
And in her mind, most of the workshops that she'd ever attended for special needs children were led by moms, and it was a room full of moms. And she said, I would really like to know what a dad goes through. And that forced me to do a lot of reflection, putting notes together. And I've continued to give that talk. In fact, I know you've sat in at least one of those.
Oh, yes. Uh-huh.
I've given that talk, which is always a little bit different depending on the audience and depending on the most recent insights that we've received many, many times. But some of the things that you and I talked for this podcast, this will be the unveiling. This is it's kind of a new phase. Because it's interesting with Johnny, he's 36.
Right.
And there's a part of him that is, I call Peter Pan.
That's a good analogy. Yeah.
And
right.
So he's like a kid, and he still enjoys watching videos. He still enjoys kid things. Mm-hmm. At the same time, he is a man.
Right.
And he needs to be treated as such. And so we have to make sure that he has his voice. We have to give him a lot of space in making decisions, choosing his own wardrobe, all kinds of things.
Right.
Because he's a man. And Sandy and I have a wonderful dynamic with Johnny. The three of us we know each other. I noticed that when I put my arm around Johnny, usually we're walking into a store or something, he'll come right next to me, put his arm around me. I'll put my arm around him. Hmm. He immediately changes his steps so that we're walking in tandem.
Oh, wow!
Because if you've ever put your arm around somebody, if you're not walking together, it's very uncomfortable. It's probably what Jesus meant about taking his yoke, and walking with him. Uh-huh. But so recently, I was going into church. And we're having construction done, so we have to park down the street because our parking lot is closed.
Wow.
And so I was walking into church, and a gentleman said, Steve, I've been looking for you. I have to tell you something. And I said, well, what's up, Jeff? And he said, a few weeks ago, I was asked to preach. And I'm going to say he's in his 70s, but he said, I was asked to preach, and we have two services. And so he finished the 8:30 service around 9:45 or 10. And he said, I started getting dizzy. I'm lightheaded. I couldn't focus. And I went out and I sat down in the narthex. I just found a chair. And I thought I was done. I didn't think I could do the second service. And Johnny was there. Now, see, John is the usher. Every week there's a different family or couple or team that does the ushering, but whenever Johnny shows up, he is number 2 on that particular team. So he passes out bulletins. He releases people from their pews for communion.
Mhm.
He helps clean up. He collects things. He makes sure that he signs the papers at the end, which verifies how much money was collected, all those kind of things.
That's cool.
And
Yeah.
um, he wants me to leave him at the door. So I'm not even allowed to walk into church with him.
Okay.
In space. And I'm happy to do that. So he walks in, and he was there a little bit early, and he saw my friend sitting in a chair, and he came over. Now I'm just telling you what I was told.
Right.
Johnny came over with such compassion and concern on his face, and pretty much made, because he doesn't speak, like you and I speak real clear, but sometimes he
Right.
really does.
Mhm.
But even though he might not be able to articulate words like I do,
Mhm.
his face, and
Yeah.
he makes what he's thinking known. And he had so much compassion, and he asked the man if he was doing okay. And
Yeah.
the man was so impacted by it, and he felt his heart,
Hmm.
that he was revived, and he was able to preach the second service. And
Wow.
he said, Steve, I have been looking for you to tell you this. He says, your son just ministered to me, just
Wow.
his compassion and reaching out. And boy, I just was taken aback by that. And I thought,
Mm.
there's my young man. There's the man.
Right. Yeah.
Now, you probably know Stephanie Hubach, who
Mhm.
wrote a book called, she's written several books, but the one that I read, the first one was Same Lake, Different Boat, about raising a son with a disability. She has a son,
Mhm.
Timmy, who's about, I'm going to say about 6 or 8 years younger than John, and he's got Downs, but boy, that guy is sharp. But she uses the words special needs or handicapped or whatever, disabled. She said, if a church does not have people with disability as a part of the body, the church is disabled
Yes, absolutely.
because they're lacking.
Mhm.
Because the Bible talks about everybody has a gift, every joint supplies. And
Yeah.
that was never more evident than when Jeff told me that. Then,
Hmm.
about a week later, John has decided he wants to go to men's meetings with me on Thursday night. He gets quite excited about them.
Awesome.
So the men's meetings is, we don't have a formal Bible study set up. It's for fellowship and connection. And another friend of mine, we work together on it. And John's decided he wants to come and he wants to participate. Well,
Yeah.
there's a man there who's battling physical ailment. He's got a tumor behind his eye.
Oh, wow.
Really difficult to get in there to do surgery, even though he's had several operations,
Hmm.
because it's close to the eye nerve and the brain.
Right.
And I've been praying for John for a long time. The other night, this fellow John, not my son John
Right.
was sitting, and we had some time to share prayer requests, and we asked him for an update. He told us,
Hmm.
and my son, who doesn't sit next to me, by the way, he sits with the other guy.
Of course.
He was sitting next to John that night. And as we began praying for John, my son put his hand on his shoulder and left it there the whole time. And I could find the text on my phone if you want me to read it. And then when he had an opportunity, there's a little break in the action. You know how prayer meetings go.
Yeah, exactly.
Johnny stepped right in and began to pray. And
Wow.
he prayed for that man and then when he was done. And afterwards, my friend John went home and sent me a text. He says, you have no idea how much having his hand on my shoulder while he prayed for me and leaving it there the whole time,
Hmm.
it was overwhelming to me. He says,
Wow.
you have no idea how much your son ministered to me tonight.
Hmm.
Isn't that something?
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yes.
I'm just going to give you two
Hmm.
more. And then these are just things that have happened in church.
Hmm.
So one week I'm sitting behind this lovely family, and they had two little girls, little boy, but they were just like, I don't know how you put it. They're like all American family. And I was
Mhm.
watching them while they were coloring. They sat quietly during the service. And after the service, I stood up, I introduced myself to the man, and I said, just want to tell you, you got a great family. Really enjoyed watching them and how well behaved they were. And
Hmm.
he said, I talk about your son all the time.
Huh.
And I said, what do you mean? And he said, I call my mother after I go to church very frequently, and I talk about John. And I said, you got to keep going. I don't know what you're
Okay. Yeah,
talking about.
exactly. What's shareable?
He said, my mother's brother has Down syndrome. He was my uncle.
Hmm.
And I've gone back to the church where that man has been attending for 40 years, 50 years. He's in his 50s.
Wow.
And he said, and I've seen him standing alone when they
Oh.
have refreshments between meetings or coffee time, and nobody talks to him.
Hmm.
But I watch your son, and I watch how he interacts with everybody and gives hugs and gives high fives. And he's just a part of the church, and it just blesses him. So then he calls his mom and tells her
Oh.
it blesses her. And I thought, isn't it nice that I sat here today? Because I would never have learned that.
Right.
But if you happen to be in a pew and Johnny recognizes you, when you get out to have communion, you get a hug, you get a fist bump. You also get something else though too, because we were in the back, fortunately, one time, and there was a man in my pew with a 2-year-old, and it was time for that 2-year-old to have a snack. So he was giving him some food, and he wasn't moving fast enough.
Oh.
And Johnny goes, "Come on!" And so it was my turn to go by Johnny. I said, "Johnny, you got to dial it back a little bit, son. Some people have children, and he goes, "Oh." No filter. But
well, he expresses what we all think inside sometimes.
absolutely. I love people with no filter because then you know where you stand. It's not
Right,
faking stuff.
exactly.
But I've had more people tell me how much it means for them to see John being a vital part of the church and giving hugs and high fives. And when he sees you,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you feel like you're the best thing since sliced bread. He'll go, "Hey," and he'll come up, give you a hug. But even if it's someone he's never met, he does that too. And people don't know that, because some people have said, I really think Johnny has a special place in his heart for me. And I just smile. And I think he does that for everybody.
That.
I don't say that. I just smile. I don't want to lie or say anything. So, but he'd make a great politician.
You can
Shaking
hug all
everybody's
those
hand.
people, shake the hands, and
Yeah.
grab the babies. Yeah.
And when I go home I go pick him up. That's one reason we had to go a little earlier today. I'm going to pick him
Right.
up at work today at 2:30. And when I pick him up, very frequently there's a note. Pray for such and such's mom. Pray for somebody's grandchild. Because he finds out that somebody is hurting at work, and then he brings a note home, and Sandy and I will pray together with them in the evening over whatever the situations are.
Wow.
And just this morning when I went into work and I saw somebody's car, and he knows everybody's car,
Mm-hmm.
and he
Of course
goes,
he
he made the
does.
sign. He said, "She's better. She's better." Because he
Oh,
feels it when people aren't well. And we have to be
right.
careful how much we tell him, because he carries these things on his heart. And
Wow.
yeah, there you go.
Wow.
What do you think of
Yeah.
that?
That is amazing. And when we were praying before the broadcast, what God had brought to mind was we just do not know
Yeah.
what God is going to do with our kids, especially when we put limitations on based on the things of this world.
Yeah.
And so I want to jump back with you, back to when Johnny was born. How much has your perception of your son changed, or your expectations of what God can do with him from when he was born to now? And how has that journey been for you as a dad?
Okay. So you're going to make me cry. My eyes are already tearing up. When Johnny was born, first of all, we didn't know he was going to be born with Down syndrome.
Mhm.
We didn't do any of those pre-testing because we didn't really care.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And there was a risk factor. So why would we do something risky when it doesn't make any difference?
Yeah.
And then we found out he had Down syndrome. I didn't know anybody with Down syndrome. I didn't know anything
Mm.
about Down syndrome. And pretty much my focus was on just taking care of my wife and my other kids and surviving. And that first year, he had probably, well, 2 catheterizations, open heart surgery, intestinal surgery. But he had 5 major stays in the hospital for,
Wow.
the first 10 months.
Mhm.
But when he was having open heart surgery, there was a family that opened up their home nearby the hospital so we wouldn't have to commute. We lived a little bit distance from the hospital, and we could stay there. And it was
Mm.
my turn to be on the night shift.
Ah.
And Sandy went home to be with the other boys and to rest. And I just remember at one point, he's got all these tubes in him and stuff, and they
Mm.
picked him up and they put him on my chest, so we could rest together.
Right.
And I saw this little guy looking at me, and
Mhm.
I said, he needs a papa.
Oh, yeah.
And we became a team right then. And
Mm.
I just had his back, and he's had my back. And
Wow.
if I introduce him to somebody, well, he actually introduces more people now than I do, because he
The roles
walks
have
right up
reversed,
to
huh?
them and he says, I'm John Demme. And then I have to explain that I'm his dad. He goes, yeah, Mark and Lucas. And I say, okay, have you ever watched The Rifleman? It's an old black and white Western where Chuck Connors plays Lucas, and I forget the boy's name. He plays Mark, and it's a story of a single dad raising his son. And
Huh.
Johnny will tell you that the wife died. But anyway, the mother died. But so that's been our identity for a long time, because I'm
Oh.
Lucas, he's Mark, and he tells people, this is Lucas, I'm Mark, I'm his son, he says. And
Mm.
the thing is that in that show, which I grew up watching when I was in the house, because I was rarely even in the home, I was
Mm.
always outside running, but I just liked it because it was a nice Western and the good guys
Mm.
won, and that kind of stuff. But when
Yeah.
I started watching with Johnny, the last 30 seconds or so of each episode, there's this really tender moment where the father and the son reconnect and process what they learned during the episode, what life lessons they can bring out of them and stuff.
Ah.
And Johnny will reach over and hold my hand and just look at
Hmm.
me. And I just,
Yeah.
so
Oh,
I'm his Lucas.
okay.
I'm his big father. And one of the main things I feel like I had to deal with as a dad was dads like to fix things.
Yeah.
We just do.
Mhm.
And every marriage counselor at some point, and every young married couple at some point has to learn this, that oftentimes my wife tells me stuff. She just wants me to hear her and
Right.
validate her. She just said it to me 2 days ago. She said, thank you for hearing me. And because I've learned.
Yeah.
And, but my nature is to look for solutions. My nature is to try to find something that I can do to make the situation better. And
Mhm.
I can't change Johnny's chromosome count. I
Right.
can't change the way that God designed him.
Mhm.
And at one point, I felt like it was, I don't remember if it was a dream or something, but I just really sensed that God was near to me. And
Hmm.
he said, what do you want me to do for this boy?
Mm.
At that point, we didn't know if Johnny would ever be able to walk,
Oh, yeah.
communicate, eat
Mm.
without a feed tube. We didn't know anything. This was early on.
Hmm.
And our midwife, frankly, had painted a pretty bleak picture. She didn't do a
Oh.
good job counseling.
Mm.
However, um, I just felt like God wanted me. He gave me a blank check. And so I
Hmm.
prayed about
Right.
everything I could think of. I said, help that boy to eat and speak and hear and walk and, anything I could think of. Help his legs, help his feet, help his hands.
Mhm.
But when I was all done, I sensed that I had taken all of my concerns and I had
Hmm.
placed it in God's lap.
Yeah.
And now it was his responsibility. Somehow I'd let it go. And I had the assurance that even if nothing was fixed to the way I wanted it,
Right.
that he would give me grace to accept John just the way he was. And so I
Mhm.
rarely think about John's limitations. I mostly think about what he can do and what he is doing. And so I don't know if that helps, but I think for
Yeah,
dads, that's something
absolutely.
we have to come to grips with, that
Yeah.
this is a gift and this is from God, and he works all things together. And I would not be who I am do or be doing what I'm doing if it wasn't for
Mm.
John, because he shaped pretty much the course of my life. So
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
yeah.
We have our own plans, but God has better ones, doesn't
Oh
he?
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great gift.
So, how, as a parent, did you start, I guess, the process of, when you're out with Johnny, and he is being himself. Um, how did that dynamic start working? I mean, when I'm assuming when he was really young, he was had that personality to go out and hug people and stuff. And how did you kind of nurture that, but yet also corral that at the same time?
Well, I don't know how I can give enough credit to my wife, but I remember a couple things. The first one was um, we had to put the little restraints on hugging everybody. In fact,
Uh,
I'm about to have that talk with them again because I saw him hug someone at church the other day that I'm not sure they wanted to be hugged. So we went through a long period where we would tell him, just put your hand out for a handshake.
mhm.
And he was really good about that. But lately it's gone back to some hugs. So I have to dial that back. That's something
Mhm.
that we deal with. Um, Another big thing was, though, that I remember going into the stores whenever we go shopping. Uh, Sandy would say to John, "You want to go with me or Pop?" Pop, because
Uh,
my wife, she holds his hand the entire time, which
oh.
to me, do unto others. I hate that kind of restraint.
Mhm.
So I would take him into Home Depot or Staples and let him go, and
Wow.
just kind of keep an eye on him. But one time I lost him and he was climbing up some shelves and he was all covered with dust. And I said, "You have a good time?" "Yep." But there were times when he would escape. He We were in a big department store at the end of a mall. You know how they have the department
Right,
stores on
yep,
the
and
edges.
the cap end, yeah.
And John just disappeared. And we were
Mm,
all with him. The whole family was there. And immediately I said to my two older boys, I said, Isaac and Ethan, I said, "Okay, you go get that exit. You get that exit."
mhm,
And Sandy went with the security guard to go down and look at the cameras for the whole store. And I said, "Joe's, you come with me. Let's go find him."
mhm.
And so we were walking past this rack, a circular rack of pants.
Uh-huh.
And all of a sudden he popped up, boo! And he wasn't escaping. He was just trying to scare us. And
Right.
so then we had to call in all the troops. But we've had a couple scares like that where, in this day and age, you have to be really careful about your kids. And
Yeah.
we thought we were being careful right then, but sometimes he's Houdini, and we had special locks put on our
Right.
house, deadbolts on all the doors, high deadbolts, not
Uh-huh.
right above the doorknob, but like up high, because we used to call him Houdini because he would
Wow.
just but most of the time now, oh goodness, now he's just a piece of cake.
Hmm.
He's gregarious. We go out to eat frequently because he makes us.
Huh.
He has a lot to do with our evening schedules, because in his
Hmm.
mind, every Monday we're going out to eat, and then
Okay.
we're coming home and we're playing cards. We play cards every night now because
Mhm.
Johnny makes us. And my wife and I have learned to go with it. And it's actually a nice
Yeah.
thing that the three of us
Mhm.
do. And then he makes us watch something which I've actually balked at. Um, I have watched too many Home Improvements and Everybody Loves Raymond, and I'm just done. I,
Uh-huh.
so I don't do that anymore. But generally, he likes it if I do, because he wants all of us to be doing things together. And so he
Yeah.
forces us to develop a rhythm. I don't know if that's exactly what you're asking, but
Yeah, it
we've
is.
gone through phases.
Right. But over time, you've kind of developed that rhythm together.
Yep.
And just embraced that he is there. He is part of this family unit for the extent of all of your lifetimes together.
Yep.
And that gives him security to be who he is. And yeah, just putting those restraints in place, and like you said, it does take time. And what a gift that you and Sandy are so different. Because I remember hearing it way in the past, like when my kids were little, that dads let kids be dangerous and moms don't.
That's
In
exactly
general,
right.
that may be the
Yeah.
flip, but it's good to have both, because then our kids know, that we love them. We want those secure spaces for them, but also that they have the freedom to be themselves too.
And a big part of our rhythm is all of his frequent appointments.
Oh,
I know this
yes.
sounds, I almost feel guilty telling people about my life with John, because I believe he enriches my life. I don't see
Mm,
him as a drain or something else I have to do. I don't feel like a caregiver. I'm just part of his team, and he's part of my team,
yeah.
and we help each other. But he does have medical things because he had open heart surgery. We have to
Mm,
have annual visits or semi-annual visits, and get
mm,
EKGs and echoes and all that, and they monitor that. And then he's had several endoscopies, so we have to
mm,
watch his reflux. He has a reflux issue, and he had surgery in his intestine. But
mm.
Sandy, to her credit, 10 or 11 years ago, she said, could we divide up
Ah.
all of these medical appointments and stuff?
Mm.
And I said, sure, not,
Not
but
really knowing what you were committing to.
so she takes him for his haircuts and his GI visits and his heart visits and that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
I do his teeth. I brush
Ah,
his teeth
uh-huh.
twice a day. I floss him more than I floss myself. And we go to get his teeth cleaned, and I'm the one that wants the sticker because I'm the one
Right.
that's been working his teeth. But so I make his dental appointments. I pay for his dental appointments, that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And then I'm in charge of feet. He developed something. You don't need to hear all the details. But anyway, so I take him to a podiatrist every 9 weeks, I think is how fast we can go. And then I'm also with the ears because one of his ear canals is a little smaller. So we have to get them cleaned out
Oh,
more frequently. And even though we can do the drops and stuff, it's never as good as when they just go in there and just
right.
pull,
Yep.
clean it out. So those appointments are my baby, taking him
Mm.
there, making the appointments, monitoring his teeth and all that. And Sandy, she also monitors, that's all I'm going to say, BMs, because as you know, you can tell a lot about a person's health by
Right.
that
Yep.
particular part. So yeah,
Absolutely.
and she sets his pills out for him, and but
Mm.
he is so faithful. He just gets up
Hmm.
and he takes his pills and he does this and does that. He gets himself dressed, and yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
But that's a long process, at the end of a long series of years, putting those things into place.
Well, I think about how Sandy did all this by herself for all these
Mm.
years, and she's homeschooling at the same time. And I just tip of the hat because I was working hard too. But
Right. Yeah.
yeah, but right now Sandy is gone. She and her three best friends are out of town for a couple of days for one of their big birthday party celebrations, and so I'm
Oh,
batching
neat.
it with John.
Ah.
And but she needs that time when she doesn't have to think about anything because
Right.
I don't know if it's just a man thing, but I'm able to compartmentalize things. So I don't think about John when he's not here. Right now,
Right.
he's at work. So I'm good.
Mhm.
I got all
Yeah.
kinds of things I want
Right.
to do.
There's other people in charge.
But Sandy can't turn it off. She carries
Oh.
his needs with her all the time. And when she's home, even if she's not doing something, she's still carrying it. So
Yeah. I think
yeah,
that is pretty typical for moms that we
yeah,
we
I
do
think so too.
that. Yeah. And it's a long-term commitment. Oftentimes we foresee our children will leave, that will take care of themselves. And then we have those kids that are with us a lot longer than that. And you just have to come to that grasp of like embracing it like you have, Steve, to say this is the way it is, and it's good. It's not a burden; it's a joy, something to be embraced and loved. I would love for you to talk just a little bit about your church too. You have shared with me in the past that it's just been a community that has really surrounded your son. And how did that cultivation begin? What did it was your church always a place that really wanted to embrace Johnny? Or has it kind of been something that required a bit of teaching and understanding or consistently maybe?
It's a really good question. But my second son, used to go to this particular church when we were going to a different church.
Hmm.
And we'll call it Church A and Church B.
Okay.
So no mention their names. But anyway, we were in Church A. It was a big non-denominational church, and they actually were the ones that connected me with Johnny and friends. So that
Okay.
was a plus.
Mm-hmm.
But their understanding of disability was a little different because they had a
Mm,
special class that the
right.
disability kids were supposed to go to, adults.
Hmm.
And Johnny went once and he went, nah. And then once a year, they would let the people with disability be a part of the ushering team. And
Hmm.
Johnny liked
And then
that.
once a year. Wow. Yeah.
And but he didn't know why he couldn't do it every week
Right.
because he can learn.
Mm-hmm.
And so then at the same time, we were visiting Church B where Ethan and Anna were going because they would sing in the choir and there'd be special productions. And when we went there, I found out that I knew a bunch of the people there as well. And the pastor and I hit it off. And Johnny, he makes friends everywhere he goes.
Oh yeah.
But so in 2014, 9 years ago, we started attending there full time. And Johnny made it clear he wanted to be an usher. So I went to the usher team and I said, I don't think John wants me to teach him how to be an usher. I think it would be a greater thing if you did it.
Right.
And so John was mentored beautifully by Dave and Rick. And here's the key. They treated him with dignity.
Mm,
They respected him.
yeah.
They treated him as an adult who has value.
Right.
And Johnny, he might not be able to pass the SAT, but he knows when he's being patronized and he
Mm,
knows when he's being looked down upon. We've had people at our family business that treated him like a little kid and he
yeah.
didn't want to go to work.
Mm,
But now he's got a job assistant and they're equal. He can't wait to get to work. So
ah.
when we watch Johnny be incorporated into the usher team and passing out the bulletins and
Mm,
but it was just the way they valued him. And then there was a
right.
change of pastors and a younger man took over and Luke
Mm,
and you want to start crying. Luke and Keith, both the two associate and the senior pastor, the two guys, they just treat Johnny like $1,000,000. I'm always getting
mm.
pictures after church. If I happen not to be there, he'll make him take a picture and text it to me, and I'll see a picture of
Oh.
him. But Johnny is always the last one to get communion because he's let everybody out. He's in the back of the room, and then he goes up, and he always goes to either Luke or Keith up at the front,
Mm.
and they put their arm around him and they pray for him because he
Oh,
asked them to pray for him, and they pray for him every week.
wow.
And it's often the same stuff. You know, he wants a
Yeah.
wife, he wants this and that, whatever. But the thing is, and he gets the elements and he walks back to the pew and he's just beaming.
Mm,
And I don't know how to tell you how much that means to a parent to have a child be included. Now,
right.
we only have a couple people in the church with disability, but yeah, they're all treated the same way. We're treated,
Mm.
there's a certain pew that has a note on it that says, hey,
Ugh.
if Olivia's coming, this is her pew. And they have a buddy system that they've created
Mm.
for Teddy because Teddy can't sit in church, but his parents want to go to church. So again, it's Rick and yeah, it's Rick and
Right.
Dave. They'll stay out. They'll go to the first service so they can take care of Teddy the second service so that the parents can go. So
Hmm.
there's not a big formal ministry, if I can put it that way, but
Right.
there is a really good inclusiveness.
Yes. Yeah.
And
That's
yeah,
really what I wanted you to hit on because
yeah,
I figured that was the case. When we put people aside, for any reason, we isolate them. And I
yeah,
remember long ago when I first started this broadcast, I interviewed a woman who was her job was to create inclusive environments in churches, and she talked about it being like a hot dish. And how every single ingredient of that hot dish was important. And you don't just put, all the carrots in one corner to make a good hot dish. You got to like mix it all in. And I thought that was a really good imagery for me to keep on how do we include other people? And then doesn't it taste better when everything is all in place? Just like you were talking about, at the beginning, we were talking about how the body just isn't the body. It's not functioning correctly if we don't have everyone playing a crucial part that God created them to play in our community.
yeah.
So
And
that's beautiful.
there's one person that I would call hearing impaired, and we've had interpreters. There's several interpreters that go to our church, and
Mhm.
they'll go down and sit right in front of her and interpret. And I used to sit behind them so that I could learn more sign language.
Ah, uh-huh.
And there's one elderly woman with dementia. And the world is a happy place for her, and she smiles, but she talks during the service. And you know what? There's no shushing.
That's
She's just
awesome.
accepted, and
Right.
people will talk to her and greet her, and you'll do the same conversation, but it's okay.
Yeah.
And so there is something. She made me cry again, but it's so precious to see that, because I have done
Right.
enough seminars where I've had people tell me that they were asked to leave their church
Yeah.
because their family didn't fit, or they
Mm.
didn't have the ability to care for them. And even though we have some people that kind of set themselves to do it, I just feel like it's the whole church mentality.
It really is. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not something that's a ministry. I'm really tired of that word, frankly, by the way.
I know. Yes.
My
Yeah.
son doesn't want to be a ministry. He doesn't want to be the object of a ministry. He just wants
Right.
to be John and be accepted and included for who he is. So,
Absolutely.
yeah,
I totally agree. But it's something that I think the church community has to like completely change, especially for those people who've had that ingrained in that we have to compartmentalize and systematically address everything instead of just by relationship.
yeah.
That and that's how Jesus ministered anyways, was by relationship. And it was each person individually.
And now that you're making me think about this, there was a Sunday school class that they had, and it was a couple weeks where I was part of the panel.
Hmm.
And we each got to give a little presentation. We're all parents of disabled kids. And then they were able to ask us questions.
Oh, yes.
See, even the fact, though, that they would have that meeting shows that there was a willingness and a desire to learn
Yeah.
and to embrace and to be more inclusive. I mean,
Right.
the fact that they even had the meeting shows that they didn't even need to have the meeting, at one level, you know. But the thing
Right.
is, people did learn from that meeting. It was an eye
Mhm.
opener
Right.
to a lot
Yeah.
of people.
And like coming in, having a child with Down syndrome without knowing it. I mean, there was so much you have learned,
Oh
over
yeah,
the years that you wouldn't have known. And you would have been one of those people on that side too. I know when my parents adopted my first sibling with special needs and having wheelchairs in the house and, feeding tubes and all of these things that I had never been used to. It was uncomfortable for a long time. But yet as, we added more siblings to the mix and it just you, now it's just a way of life. You walk into my parents' house and that's just the way it is. And it's completely different. But for a lot of people, we do need to realize how scary that is, and just, help them to embrace the specialness by treating our kids, and everybody with disability the way that we know that they want to be treated.
Yeah. Well, see, now you're making me think of all kinds of things, Peggy. So there's a family that adopted a girl, and she's needy,
Hmm.
and she's on the spectrum and unable to verbalize. So
Yeah.
she uses sign language, but she's also on the spectrum. So it's really hard to even find a school situation where you have somebody with both of those skills that can sign
Right.
and understands the spectrum.
Hmm.
And I happened to catch her mom in a different situation one day by herself, and I said, "I've been wanting to talk to you." I said, "But
Hmm.
I don't want to talk to you in front of your kids, especially your special daughter."
Hmm.
And she said, "Well, what do you want to know?" And I said, "How are you and your husband doing? Because you look tired."
Yeah.
Now, see, I would never have been in that world if I hadn't had Johnny, but I said, "Are you getting
Right.
some time, just the two of you?"
Hmm.
And first of all, she looked at me and almost cried, and she said, "Thank you for asking,
Hmm.
and thank you for understanding." And then she said, "Yeah, some things have changed. My husband is able to work at home now for the first time. We're starting to set
Hmm.
up lunch dates while my daughter's in school." She says, "But interesting you asked me that today because she's just being moved out of the current classroom because they don't know what to do with her."
Uh,
So this is something that's ongoing for them. And
right.
I said, "Well, if your husband is willing, I'd be happy to take him out for lunch or something." And so anyway, we're still
Hmm.
pursuing that, but
Right.
I wouldn't have been able to see those signals. I wouldn't even know what to say. But just
Right.
the fact that I observed it and was caring
Hmm.
meant a lot to her. And
Yeah.
yeah,
And really, it does for a lot of the families that are in that situation. And unfortunately, there just isn't always somebody who understands.
yeah,
So, um, but yeah. So I'm just going to put it out there for our listeners. If you have the ability to reach out to a family, even if you can't offer a solution, you know, just pray and say, God, what do you want me to say to them, and approach them, because you just do not know the impact that you can have. Just saying, I get it, or maybe I don't get it, but I want to get it. I want to understand more.
yeah.
That's super important. We need community to surround us, and God didn't create us to live without community, and we we just need to be surrounded. So
Amen.
yeah. So, anything else that you want to share? And it's on your heart?
No, I
No?
think I think we covered it. I do know that anybody that, like you say, shows compassion and understanding and just comes up and asks you how you're doing, or yeah, it means a lot.
It
But
does.
but when you talked about Johnny being having two parents who are very different, fortunately, he's an extrovert. So
Ah.
uh, here's what happens after church. John won't leave until things are cleaned up and he signed the papers and da 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 da, and he's shaking everybody's hand and all whatever. So my dear wife, we take two sets of keys, and she just goes out and sits in the car.
Oh.
And Johnny and I are the two extroverts, and we don't leave and pretty much until everybody else has left. And because we like people, so
Right.
it does make it easier for the two of us to hang out. And just this morning, there's a local restaurant just opened up a month ago,
Hmm.
and somebody recommended it. So I said, "John, you want to go out to eat this morning?" "Oh yeah, he likes that." So we went to breakfast, and this menu was great too because it had pictures.
Ah.
Because he won't order unless he can pretend he's looking at the book. I shouldn't say pretend, but you know what I mean. So
Right.
he saw and he ordered eggs Benedict,
Hmm.
and so that was good. And then the waitress came. First time we met her, he introduced himself. "I'm John." She said, "I'm Jen." So right away. And then after he'd talked to her a little bit, he goes like this: "Cute girl." So I called Jen back and I said, "Jen, I think you missed something." She said, "What's that?" And I said, "He just told you you're a cute girl." Now, I have seen him do that to some people that I wouldn't have used those words from, but
Mhm.
I've seen them just beam because
Mm.
it's nice being told that you're a cute girl.
Yeah.
And Johnny, then he gives his shy little smile and they walk away grinning because they've just
Right.
been told that they look good. So,
Aw.
yeah, he's something.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And I love that you're enamored and constantly, just filled with joy
Yeah.
over, the things that he is giving into the community as you
He
see him
doesn't like
interact.
snow, though.
Oh, really?
He even makes a spitting motion now. When I tell him it's going to snow, it's supposed to snow in 2 days here. And he goes,
Oh, yeah. Yep.
but you know why? Because he misses work.
Oh, that's right. I think you've told me that in the past
Most
before.
people think that it's snowing. Yes, vacation. And Johnny goes, no. And I tell him, I said, come on, buddy. I got a 4-wheel drive. I have my own key. We will make this happen. And he goes, so
Oh, that's great.
yeah,
I
he's
don't
a
like
hoot.
snow either. That's why I moved to Texas. You can tell him I agree with him. Uh, well, that's awesome. I would love for you to talk just a little bit about building faith families and just some of the resources that
Okay.
you
Well,
offer there.
so I'll just tell you one more little thing before I do
Oh,
that
yeah,
is
absolutely.
when I was teaching and pastoring way back when Johnny was born,
Mhm.
um, when he had all those surgeries, I was shot. I
Yeah.
was
Mm.
emotionally burned out. My wife was as well. We had to say goodbye to everything we were doing,
Mm.
move to a different state to just regroup as a family.
Hmm.
In the process, I had to make money.
Yeah.
So I started tutoring, but my wife was probably in worse shape than I was. So
Hmm.
tutoring allowed me to work flexible. I didn't have to be
Right.
gone the whole day. So she could take somebody to the doctor or whatever, and I could just rearrange my schedule.
Mhm.
But that tutoring grew into Matthew C.
Right. And it's
If
now
there,
Demi learning.
if exactly. So this is what I mean about Johnny shaping my life.
Mm.
Then the building faith families happen because I'm of the conviction that the family unit is the basic building block of everything.
It
You want to have
is.
healthy churches, you need to make healthy families. You want healthy
Mhm.
communities, you need healthy families. It all goes back to the family.
Yeah.
But there is a kind of I've observed that there's a lot of organizations that have the name family in their ministry, but
Mm.
they're pretty much just pointing out what things are anti-family or what things could
Mm.
hurt your family, whether it's screen time or whatever.
Right.
And I said, but yeah, but we need to be building families. We need to be
Right.
encouraging families. So
Hmm.
this is what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to encourage dads. I'm trying to encourage parents. I'm trying to build them up
Hmm.
because there's probably everybody I've ever talked to that struggles with their, what would you call it, concept of God the Father is
Hmm.
because of their relationship with their earthly father.
Yeah.
And, and I know that's a really broad stroke, but I'm telling you, I have been in men's retreats where we tell our stories. And when I asked them the question, what has shaped you? Every single man talked about their dad.
Hmm.
And so what we need to do, as far as I'm concerned, is work on encouraging dads to be better husbands, better fathers. And my latest thing is I'm realizing that Jesus was a really good savior because he was also a well-loved son.
Yeah.
And my
Mm.
relationship with my heavenly father is what colors my relationships with my family. So
Mm.
I'm trying to encourage dads, be a son first.
Right.
Keep working on that, your relationship with your dad, and
Hmm.
then pass on the same thing that he gives to you, to your kids and your wife. So
Absolutely. And
there
wherever
you
we
go.
start, it's
Yep.
a starting point, but you're changing and you're growing and yeah, I've seen the same thing with my husband growing in his faith and how it just reflects almost instantly on my kids. And that is, it's just amazing to watch. I as the mom just sit back and pray because it's God's work. It's not mine. But he is faithful to take us from
Amen.
wherever we're at and help. So thank you for those resources. So that's buildingfaithfamilies.org. And then the Matthew C. has grown into Demme Learning. And I'll put both of those links in the show notes on the podcast as well as on YouTube. So you can find those and click on them right away. Any closing remarks, Steve?
No, I can't think of anything.
Well,
Sorry.
thank you so much for sharing. You've shared a lot, and
Well,
probably given my guests a lot to chew on this hour. Just we have to look at our kids from a totally different perspective than the world tells us to look at them, and that takes intention, and also just that constant putting our kids before God and being reminded of who they are in his image and not who they are compared to other people's kids. Our hopes and dreams for them, but he has something better. So
amen.
thank you
So,
for encouraging us
so
that.
you prayed to begin. Can I pray in closing?
Yes, I would love that.
Okay. Father, thank you for being our dad and loving us and liking us, even with all of our foibles and interesting components. But we are created in your image, and we are all created in your image.
Yes.
And I pray that you'll encourage all the parents that are watching today and listening. I pray that you'll give them a fresh dose of grace. I pray that you'll help them to see their kids, as Peggy said, from your perspective, and help us to grow in our relationship with you so that will be passed on to our own children. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. Always
You're
nice
welcome.
to end in a blessing. And thank you all for joining us. I saw quite a few of you popping on today. I know it was more of a conversation just to listen to versus join in on. Steve had so many wonderful things to share. If you caught us towards the end, I encourage you to watch from the beginning or to rewind once the video goes up for your reviewing. But I did 2 broadcasts this week intentionally because next week I am off. But after that, we have Heidi St. John coming on, and she is going to share with us a new project she's working on that will encourage you as a mom to let go of perfection. So
Amen.
I'm
Tell
super
Heidi I
excited
said
about
hi.
that. Yeah, okay. I definitely will. So thank you all for joining us. Have a great couple weeks. If you're listening to the podcast, the next podcast will be the interview with Heidi. But until then, God bless and take care, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool. Go to spedhomeschool.com to get resources and support for teaching your unique learner at home.